Now, last night I spoke to a number of people who currently are a smoker. They would like to be a non-smoker, and people had different levels of leverage. The question I asked everyone that I spoke to was, on a scale of 1 to 10, how big of a problem is smoking for you? 10 being a lot, 1 being not much at all. And so people were giving me different figures. Some people said 7. Some people were hesitant to give me a number. They're like, oh no, it's just a big problem. And so I had to keep on asking them about, what number would you give me? I then made sure I calibrated with them. So I first understood what was their leverage. I then calibrated, making sure we had the same understanding as to what an 8 out of 10 means, or what a 9 out of 10 means, or what a 10 out of 10 means. And then I had to give them another task. I gave them, this is something that a lot of hypnotherapists, especially new hypnotherapists, they kind of feel uncomfortable with. But it's one of the crucial components to guaranteeing the success of the session. And that is that you want to give your client an ordeal. And so we give our client an ordeal. You might recall last night I mentioned the word ordeal, and I said, it was interesting to see what sort of ordeals people went through to be here, the distance that you've travelled. Some of you went through longer ordeals to come to this course, some of you just went through shorter ordeals. An ordeal gives you some insight into how invested people are to do the thing that they've gone through the ordeal to do. So if you've travelled interstate to come to this course, well, I'd say you really want to learn the content of this course. It's not to say that if you only travel a short distance, you don't want to learn it, but it just lets you know that if someone goes through a big ordeal to get to an outcome, they obviously really want to get that outcome. The ordeal that we give to our client should push them outside their comfort zone. It should push them outside their comfort zone to test that leverage that they said. So if they said they're an 8 out of 10, I will give an ordeal to my client that's going to push them outside their comfort zone that is aligned with what an 8 out of 10 should be. If it's a 10 out of 10, what does a 10 out of 10 mean to you? You do anything, right? You do anything. So I'm going to give a big ordeal to that person. If they said they're a 10 out of 10, and I'll calibrate, I'll say, well, a 10 out of 10 means to me, you'd be willing to do almost anything, pretty much anything, to get this outcome. Is that what it means? Yes, it is. So I'm going to give them an even bigger ordeal that's going to test, are they really a 10 out of 10? Or are they just giving me lip service? So we want to have them push outside their comfort zone. Now, a lot of hypnotherapists, they use a very standard ordeal that is not always that effective. And their ordeal is, I will work with you, I'll help you get your outcome if you pay my fee. If you pay my fee, I'll work with you. Who is that not an ordeal for? What sort of person? Someone that's wealthy. Somebody that's wealthy, it does not push them outside their comfort zone. I mean, if they're a multi-millionaire and you're like, oh, well, if you pay my fee of $300, I'll work with you. They're like, oh, yeah, done. They'll probably pull out a wad of $5,000 and go, there you go, there's $300 right now, let's do it. So it's not going to push them outside their comfort zone. Now, for most people, you don't know what your client's financial means are. You don't know whether they're a multimillionaire or whether they're wealthy or maybe they're not, maybe they're on Centrelink. You just don't know that. And so by giving someone a financial ordeal is not always the best ordeal. Now, admittedly, if you're running a business, then always use a financial ordeal, but use another ordeal as well. If somebody's really wealthy, what do they value more than money? Time. So you ask them to go through some sort of experience. And so ideally, you want your ordeal to be based on some sort of experience. Helps me spell it right? Experience. Something that requires some sort of effort on their behalf. You also ideally want to give them an ordeal that you can validate. Something that there is some sort of evidence that they have completed it. You want to have some sort of evidence that they've completed it. You don't want to leave it to them to just tell, oh yeah, I did that thing that you asked me to do, and I did it all at home. well then they might be, again, telling you that they did something that they actually didn't. So you want to ask someone to go through an ordeal that pushes them outside their comfort zone, requires some sort of effort, and that you can validate that they've done that. And so when I was speaking to people last night, I gave these people an ordeal. Now I haven't chosen who I'm going to work with yet, because for me, I cannot choose someone until they've proven to me that they've completed the ordeal. So I don't know whether they've completed the ordeal until this morning. So last night, all I was doing was just interviewing people, find out what's their leverage like, are they at cause, do they have the right belief in place, and then give them an ordeal. This morning is when I find out whether they've completed that ordeal or not. And so they do not become your client until they complete the ordeal. If they don't complete the ordeal, what's that showing you? They're not ready. They may be at effect. They may have fallen into effect. Oh, Shane, look, can I still work with you? Look, you don't understand. I got up late this morning. The traffic was really bad. I couldn't do it. The kids were doing this. They will make excuses as to why they couldn't do it. So that tells you that maybe the leverage wasn't as high as what they really said. Now, last night, what I sometimes do with people, especially if one of the reasons why they're smoking or the problem around smoking is a financial one, I'll say to them, look, I'm going to ask you to do something for me. Would you be happy to do something for me? So I get them to just softly agree to that first. They don't know what they're agreeing to yet. They're like, okay, yeah, I'll be happy to do something for you. Fantastic. Then I say to them this. I find out how many cigarettes a day they smoke on average. They tell me a figure, maybe 10, let's say 10. And so I extrapolate that. I go, well, what's that a week? That's about, 70 a week. I then say to them, I think, 70 cigarettes a week. I then say to them, what if I was to say to you, I will give you $1 million. I will give you $1 million, and all you need to do for me is give me 70 cigarette butts. I'll give you $1 million. All you need to do is give me 70 cigarette butts. That's it. 70 cigarette butts, I'll give you $1 million. Is that a fair deal? What do you think they say to that? Yeah, right? Like, yes, I'll do that. Say, but I need you to give me those 70 cigarette butts by 9:30 tomorrow morning. Would you be willing to do that? Like, yeah, I'd go through the bins if I had for $1 million. Yeah, so would I. Someone said, just go pick up 1,000 cigarette butts and do it before 9:30, I'd still do that for $1 million, right? I mean, what's 1,000 cigarette butts? Maybe 2 or 3 hours of just going through bins for $1 million. Unless you're germophobic, maybe you wouldn't do it, I don't know. And so I make sure that they're invested. Like, yeah, I'll do that. Fantastic. I go, well, I'm not going to give you $1 million, but I'm going to help you become a lifelong non-smoker. All I'm going to ask you, though, is to pay me with 70 cigarette butts. You give me 70 cigarette butts, I will help you become a lifelong non-smoker. And so what I do is I've just made sure that they're willing to pick up 70 cigarette butts if leverage is huge. $1 million, $10 million, whatever their figure is, to live a healthy life until you're 100, whatever it is, to look after your children, make sure they can go through all the education they want to go through. Whatever their leverage is, you sort of put that as their goal. You do this to pick up 100 cigarette butts, 70 cigarette butts. Yes, I'd do that. Okay, well now it's not that thing. It's actually just your life. It's just you getting your result that you want to get. Would you still be willing to pick up those amount of cigarette butts? And so that becomes their ordeal. That becomes their ordeal. Now, when I give the ordeal to my client, much like Milton Erickson changed the way that we perform hypnosis now, it's not what my client says that's important, it's what my client shows me. So as soon as I gave the ordeal to people last night, I said to them, okay, I'm going to ask you to pick up 100 cigarette butts. I'm watching their physiology. And instantly, as soon as I give that ordeal to them, I can see whether it's pushed them outside their comfort zone. What do you think I see if I know that they're pushed outside their comfort zone? And I ask them to pick up 100 cigarette butts. What sort of physiology do you think people might show? They're like, it's like something like that. Like they pull back a little bit. There'll be like some sort of, they might even swallow. They might like, there is some physiological shift that lets you know they don't like that task that you've given them. And that's what we want. We don't want to give a task to our client that they like. We want them to be pushed outside their comfort zone. It should be, to some extent, uncomfortable. However, you don't want to be so uncomfortable it causes another problem. And it's typically wouldn't happen with picking up cigarette butts, but you wouldn't if someone has post-traumatic stress disorder. Let's say they've been through some trauma in the past and they have the PTSD. You wouldn't ask them to get a group hug with 50 other people, because that may create a huge amount of anxiety, that might create another problem for them. And so when you give an ordeal to your client, it's a judgment call as to how far outside their comfort zone you're pushing them. We don't want to push them to the extreme, but we do want to push them outside their comfort zone just enough to test that leverage. And so if I was to give an ordeal to someone and I see a physiology of extreme fear or extreme anxiety, then I know at that point that that ordeal pushes them too far. So I then bring it down. I sort of scale it down a little bit more. So I said to someone, I'm going to ask you to get a group hug with 70 people. And I saw fear in their eyes and they're and it was extreme anxiety. I might say, okay, you know what? No, I've got a different idea for you. I'm going to ask you to just go out on the street and shout, I love myself at the top of your lungs. Something that isn't going to include other people. So it's okay to change your ordeal. I don't say to my client, oh, sorry, I made a mistake. Why do you think I wouldn't say that? I lose prestige. I just say, I reframe, say, oh, you know what? Actually, no, I've got a better idea for you. And I just come up with a different idea. And so if you need to change your ordeal, that's okay. Now, there's times when I scale up the ordeal as well. I'll speak to someone and say, okay, I'm going to ask you to pick up 100 cigarette butts. And they're like, yeah, all right, done. I'll say, okay, well, now it's 200. I'm like, what? Can't it just be 100? Because I don't know, maybe in their head, they're thinking, 100, that's easy. I've got 150 in a jar at home. I just need to go home and just go, done. And they don't know that their body language betrays them. They don't know them and they're like, yeah, okay, I'll do that. You're looking for that physiology. You don't see a physiology of discomfort, so you increase it. Now, I didn't have to do that last night because I saw discomfort in most people's faces, or in everyone's faces. So I gave them an ordeal. It's an experience that they had to go through, and I can validate it because I tell the people to bring in the cigarette butts. Now, if you can smell a faint smell of cigarette butts, it's probably because there's probably like 300 or so in the room right now, if not more. So I validate it. Now, if someone doesn't turn up with cigarette butts, I don't work with them. I don't work with them. I've had a client before and she wanted to improve her sales results. She was in sales and she wanted to improve her confidence, and she was a very prim and proper sort of person. She was in her late 20s. Her hair was always immaculate, perfect makeup, like designer clothing. She had like a Louis Vuitton handbag, all the sort of stuff that she just wanted to look the part for her job. And she wanted me to help her with her sales and her confidence. And for the life of me, I couldn't think of an ordeal that related to confidence and sales. And it's not about always finding an ordeal that's related to the problem. So for example, smoking, picking up cigarette butts, it's related to the problem. And it helps the person overcome that problem, because what do you think they're thinking when they're picking up cigarette butts? Yuck, disgusting. And so anytime you associate negativity or pain to the old problem, especially if that old problem was reinforced by pleasure. So for example, the reason why people smoke is because they associate more pleasure with it than pain. If you're a non-smoker, the reason why you don't smoke is because you associate more pain than pleasure. And so to help a smoker become a non-smoker, we need to change that balance. We need to bring more pain to being a smoker than the pleasure. So by them picking up cigarette butts, we're actually doing that at an unconscious level. However, with the sales and confidence, I was thinking, well, it's not really a pleasure-based problem. It's more of a pain-based problem. So here was this woman not feeling it. She's very confident, and so there's not pleasure involved in that. But I had to give her an ordeal. And I thought, okay, I need to come up with an ordeal at the top of my head. And I thought, well, here's this woman that looks immaculate all the time. She's obviously very conscious of how she looks. And I thought, well, if I can get her to change her look, that's probably going to push her outside her comfort zone. So I said to her, okay, do you really want me to work with you? Is this a big problem for you? Yes, it's a big problem. It's a 10 out of 10 for her. So I said, okay, let's schedule an appointment in a few days' time. When you turn up, I want you to turn up not having had a shower, no makeup. I don't want you to have done your hair, and I want you to turn up with your daggy clothes. She's like, yeah, right, okay, I'll do that. So I saw the physiology. She was committed to doing it. A few days later, she turns up. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect attire. She's like, Shane, you don't understand. I've got clients to see, I've got appointments after this. I don't have time to go home. Look, I really am committed. You don't understand. I'm really committed. Can you please, I know you told me to turn up with no shower, no makeup, but look, I have clients scheduled. Can we still do it? I really want to get this outcome. I said, no. I said, no, I'm not going to work with you today. I questioned her a little bit further and said, well, look, do you still want me to work with you? Do you still want me to help you? She said, yes, I do. I said, let's schedule it again, but this time I'm going to ask you to do something for me. Would you be willing to do something for me? Yes, I would. Fantastic. I'm going to ask you to turn up in a few days' time, no hair, not having done your hair, no shower, no makeup, daggy clothes, and this time I want you to get dirt and I want you to rub it on your face. It's like, what? Can't I just do the rest without the dirt? Can I just, like, I'll just do all the rest, but just not the dirt. I go, no, now I need you to be even more committed. So now I need you to rub dirt on your face. A few days later, she turns up, no shower, no makeup, not having done her hair, in her tracksuit pants, and she had more dirt on her face than I expected her to see. And she ended up getting a result. And so you need to have that confidence that you do not work with a client unless they complete their ordeal, because if they don't complete their ordeal, they're just showing you that maybe they don't have enough leverage, maybe they've gone into effect, and so you're already building on failure. And so you always want to make sure that your client is building on success, and you are the expert in this process, and you want to make sure that your client is able to follow that process as well. And so that's just an example of some ordeals. Now, some other ordeals I've used for people with smoking is I've asked them to go to a hospital and go speak to someone that's suffering from maybe cancer or a smoking-related disease. Now, how do you think we could validate whether they did that or not? What's some way that we could get some evidence that they've actually done that? Photo. So I heard someone say photo. Most people have a smartphone these days. And so I asked people to take a photo of themselves at the hospital. I don't ask them to take a photo of themselves with the patient, because that might be breaching that patient's privacy. And so I don't want to put them in that sort of position, but I'll say to them, look, I want you to take a photo of yourself near maybe a sign that is identifies that you actually were at the hospital. Now, if my client was to go to the hospital, take a photo of themselves next to the sign, not go and see the patient and then come back, do you think I overly care too much where they did that and didn't go speak to the patient? Yes or no? I don't really care too much, because what does my client show me already? That they've gone through the ordeal of taking time out of their day to go down to that area, take a photo. They were maybe freaked out. They're like, I don't want to go speak to that person that's suffering cancer. I mean, like, what do I say to them? And so they're already associating what? Pleasure or pain, do you think? Pain with smoking. They're already associating pain with it without having to actually go speak to the person. And so anytime you come up with an ordeal, especially if it's an ordeal that has pleasure associated to it, if you can have some sort of pain association, it will help release the hold over that problem. Is this making sense so far? Yes or no? Yes. Yep. So if someone wants to donate kilograms back to the universe, what sort of ordeals do you think you could use with someone like that? Now, obviously, maybe food. Would you think that food would be pleasure associated or pain associated? Pleasure. Probably pleasure. A lot of people use it for comfort. And so what is something you could ask someone to do that you can validate that might push them outside their comfort zone to do with that particular food? Yes, Nick?
Bring you some research on what the effects of obesity.
Yes. Yeah, ask them, say to them, I want you to bring in 10 facts about the impacts that obesity has on the body. Absolutely. That's going to increase the pain associated with obesity, and therefore it's going to help them make that unconscious change. Yeah, absolutely. Great one.
Throw food out.
Throw food out, yes. So there's many times in the past I've asked people to bring in their favourite food, and then I get them to destroy it. I get them to stomp on it, or get them to throw it out, whatever it might be. Yes. So that's another good one. Yes.
Bring food left over.
Bring
Food left over.
Bring the food in that's left over. Yeah. And what would you ask them to do? Like, what would that be? Would that be push them outside their comfort zone, perhaps? Like in terms of what they can't eat it and they bring it into you?
Getting some food left over from rubbish bin.
Oh, getting food out of the rubbish bin. Yeah. I mean, look, that would be uncomfortable for a lot of people. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, Alyssa.
Asking someone in public if she can finish
finish their meal because they haven't finished what they've eaten.
Asking someone in public whether you can finish their meal? Yeah.
Table, they leave their meal, you think, what a waste. And if they go sit down and eat it, don't you think they'll feel uncomfortable?
They would definitely feel uncomfortable. However, I may not think that's congruent because you're asking them to eat more food. And so, if anything, I would probably try to encourage them to reduce their consumption rather than increasing it. It's kind of like where you may have heard of parents who may have done this with a child when they find their teenager that smokes. And they're, all right, sit down and smoke this whole pack of cigarettes. That's an ordeal, but it's not a congruent ordeal because you're adding more poison to the body. And so anytime, it definitely is an ordeal, but it's not a congruent ordeal. If I say, okay, so you love, Big Macs? All right, sit down and eat 5 Big Macs. That's an ordeal, but you're adding more, I guess, negative load on the body, and you don't know what's the one that sort of tips it over into the balance that creates disease. So it is definitely an ordeal, but I wouldn't encourage them to eat somebody else's food as such. Yeah, exactly, yeah. Nick?
Get them to take a photo of everything they eat for the next couple of days.
Yes, keep a food diary or a video record of everything that they eat, yes. So again, in the past I've asked people to keep a food diary. Some other people have asked them to just take a photo and to tell me on a scale of 1 to 10 how good they felt after eating it or what triggered them to eat that particular food. And therefore I can go through that diary with them. Now again, I don't really mind if someone forgot to complete that diary and then the morning of the appointment they sat down for an hour and filled it all out, because they're still going through that ordeal to put that time and effort in creating a food diary. Now, if they just said, I ate salad here, I ate salad, well, they're not giving you enough insight to really find out what else is their problem, but they're still completing their ordeal. I mean, I never challenge my client at, hang on, this is not real, because I don't know. I don't know whether it's real or not. As long as they've completed the ordeal that I'm asking them to, that's good enough for me. So, some other ordeals that are generic ordeals is I've had someone that wanted to change a part of their body. They wanted to improve their body that was like a physical malfunction for them. Someone that had a stroke when he was 4 and wanted to improve his mobility, even though the doctors and all the people in his life had said, that's just how you are, and I don't think you're ever going to get full function in your arm again. My ordeal for him was to read a book or to read a few chapters of a book that it was the Brain That Changes Itself, to start to show him that maybe there was a way for him to gain more mobility back. The Brain That Changes Itself by Norman Doidge is all about the neuroplasticity that we have in our brains, that we now understand that we can do amazing things that sometimes challenge some of the medical science that we're aware of, or that we used to be aware of. And so I gave him that book, that ordeal, to read that book. Now, he also, because he suffered from a stroke, he found he had some cognitive challenges as well. So it wasn't to read the entire book, because that to him was too big of an ordeal. It was just to read a few chapters. Now, how do you think you'd be able to verify whether this person had read a few chapters or not? Yeah, ask some questions. And so I said to him, I want you to give me a summary on each chapter. I want you to tell me just the 3 high-level points from each chapter. And so all he had to do was bring in like 9 dot points, I think it was now, to let me know that he's read that book. And he came in and he now had a belief that he could change his body. I can tell you 2 years later, he's now training to become a Paralympian. He's got more mobility in his arm now, and he's now a public speaker. And so because that ordeal was to help build the belief for himself to make that transformation. So if you find a book that's going to help that client build the belief and support their transformation, that's another ordeal you can use. Other ordeals I've used before is I've asked someone to write a story. I said, okay, I'm just going to ask you to write a story, 2-page story, just a 2-page story on what your life will be like 3 years from now, having overcome this problem. Who is that not an ordeal for? Or was it?
A writer.
A writer, exactly. If they're a writer, don't ask them to do that. But if there's someone that doesn't really sit down and write stories, well then that's going to be an ordeal for them. And sometimes I'll ask them to write a story, a 2-page story on what their life will be like 3 years from now, but in also, having overcome the problem, they also ask to write another 2-page story on what their life will be like 3 years from now if they don't overcome the problem. Because human beings were either motivated by pain or motivated by pleasure. Some of us are motivated by both. And because you may not know whether your client's motivated by pain or pleasure, we want to motivate them with both. So you sometimes give them both ordeals, to write one on pain and one on pleasure. And so that gives you a collection of generic ordeals that you can use for your clients. But again, you really want to make sure that your clients are being given an ordeal that pushes them outside their comfort zone, that requires some sort of effort, and that you can validate it as well. Question?
So you would do this during your first 15-minute consult?
Yes. And this is why, Juliet, I was saying last night that I prefer to do it face-to-face. Because I'm doing this over the phone, what I have now eliminated from my awareness is all the visual cues. And so when I say I want you to pick up 100 cigarette butts, I'm waiting for them to respond, and I can't see any physiological shift. Whereas I know I can get better results just by bringing them in, and that in itself is an ordeal. To ask someone to come see you for 15 minutes for a free consultation is an ordeal as well. And so the more ordeals you can layer in, it's almost more of a filter. You're filtering out the people that are like, yeah, can you help me, but under these perfect conditions? Well, no, I want you to be that invested that even if under less than perfect conditions, you're still invested to get your outcome. And that's really what you're doing with an ordeal. Does that answer your question? Great question. Fantastic. Any questions on ordeals? No questions? Is it all making sense, yes or no?
Yes.
Yep, great. Okay, so like I said last night, I gave people ordeals to pick up cigarette butts. Question? Yes?
Have you ever been lost in coming up with an ordeal? You ever been stumped?
Not long term. So when I say stumped, I've been stumped for 10 seconds. I'm like, okay, what am I going to come up with? And then that's why I have some of the generic ones, like writing a story, you read a book, go watch a movie, keep a diary. Those sorts of things can be used for pretty much any problem. Any problem, keep a diary for it. Any problem, I think of, okay, what's a book that I'm aware of that is an example of someone overcoming this problem. Sometimes I don't even know the book, but I might say, okay, I want you to go and find a book. My ordeal for you is to go find a book where it's an example of someone overcoming this problem. And I want you to read at least one chapter of that book. And so I put the onus on them to go and find it. Maybe I don't know what it is. Sometimes I'll say to them, as Nick suggested, I'll go and get them to do some research. I want you to go do some research and find 5 articles on the negative effects of this problem, or maybe I might say, if it's to be more pleasure associated, I might say I want you to go and find 5 articles that contain solutions to how to overcome this problem. So again, if it was something that was, let's say it's anxiety, they already know the ill effects of anxiety. They're feeling it every day. I want you to go and find articles on all the negative side effects of it, because they already feel that unconsciously. So I don't want to add more negativity to their experience. So I will say to them, I want you to go and find 3 things from 5 articles that someone can do that's experiencing anxiety to reduce their anxiety on a daily basis. And so all I'm going to do is just inform themselves. I'm not saying they have to do it. That way they unconsciously have some conscious solutions that they come and see me with. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So some of those generic ones, the ones that I kind of keep in my back pocket in case I can't think of something. And I bring them out. My, I guess, self-set standard is to come up with the most creative ordeal for this individual that is going to be tailored to them. And that's kind of what I start with. If I can't think of something, then I'll go to my plan Bs. Fantastic. Any other questions on ordeals? Question? Yes?
Does it matter how much time happens between when the ordeal is set and when the actual hypnosis happens?
Not really, yeah. Doesn't overly matter. I don't focus on that. It's not something I think about. I mean, last night obviously is a short period of time, but there have been times when I've said to keep a diary, and so they're keeping a diary over maybe a week. There are times when I'll ask them to do something and I don't even bother to find out, did you do it last night? Did you do it the day after we spoke? All I really want to do is just make sure that they've done it. So it's not something I overly think about, and so therefore I don't think it's overly important. Answer your question? Great question. Any other questions? Okay, so like I said, last night I asked people to pick up cigarette butts. Now the other ordeal I gave to people, now I don't say to someone, oh, I'm going to give you an ordeal. I don't say that, because an ordeal may have a negative connotation to it. So I don't use the word ordeal when speaking to my client, but it's just what you know that you're giving to your client. I ask them, would you be willing to do something for me? Great, fantastic. Well, this is what I'm going to ask you to do. I also asked smokers last night, when they go home, when they wake up in the morning, if they still want to be a non-smoker. So I let them know, look, I don't care if you wake up tomorrow and you still want to be a smoker. Doesn't worry me. Doesn't affect my life. I'll go away and live my life and you get to live your life that way. And so I show them there's no judgment. There's no pressure to become a non-smoker. Not from me anyway. And so I let them know that if you wake up in the morning and you still want to be a non-smoker, then what I want you to do is I want you to collect all the smoking paraphernalia that you have at home. Your lighters, your ashtrays, your e-cigarettes, your nicotine patches, your gum, your sprays, your cigarette papers, whatever you have that is smoking related, I want you to put it in a bag and bring it in with you. Why do you think I would ask them to do that? Because you get rid of it? Yeah, I don't know whether I'm going to get rid of it or not yet, but I might. What else do you reckon I ask that? As Gail's saying, yes. So there's no temptation when they get home. Our environments are the biggest influence in our life because we are influenced by our environment at an unconscious level. You don't know you're being influenced by your environment with the environment that you're in. Most of us don't know that anyway. And so by having a home environment with smoking paraphernalia around there means that unconsciously you're being influenced by it. A non-smoker's home typically does not have ashtrays in it. Does typically not have cigarettes laying around, does not have e-cigarettes. I have not met a non-smoker that has some nicotine patches in a drawer somewhere, unless they've forgotten about it when they used to be a smoker. It's not in your perception as a non-smoker. And so what we do is we help our client create a home environment that's going to support them before they become a non-smoker. And so it's another part of that ordeal. It's another part for them to decide, am I really committed to doing this or not? If they are, then they bring all their stuff in, and then you'll ask them to leave it with you or to destroy it. Because why would they need that stuff if they're a non-smoker? It does not have any value. It has no value. As a non-smoker, if someone gives me a pack of cigarettes, a brand new pack of cigarettes, I can easily throw that in a bin. It has no value to me whatsoever. I don't think, oh, that's like $20. It's like $30 there. It has no value. That to me, it's like, that is pain. That's cancer. That's a stroke. Get rid of that. Has no value whatsoever. It only has value to smokers, people that are still in the mindset of being a smoker. Someone gives me an ashtray, can get rid of that easily. Nicotine patches, get rid of that easily. And so what you're going to ask your client to do is start to make that mindset shift into becoming a non-smoker, to start to behave like a non-smoker, even if it's uncomfortable to begin with.